All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Endurance Sports University Triathlon Study Hall, episode number 9. Those of you that don't know me, my name is Ryan Reel. I'm the head coach and the founder here at Endurance Sports University, USA Triathlon Level 2 coach, youth and junior certified coach, master's degree in exercise physiology biomechanics, another master's degree in organic and biological chemistry, USA Triathlon high performance team head coach, team director from 2011 to present. Was a elite coach over at Training Bible Coaching for a while before I broke away and decided to do my own thing over here at Endurance Sports University. So that's a little bit about me. What is Endurance Sports University? For those of you that haven't been here before, international leader in triathlon education and coaching resources, ultimately providing services for athletes, self-coached athletes, and for coaches, basically coaching the coaches. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, that's why you're here, I'm guessing. You want to learn more about the Ironman Marathon today and long run training. So I want to tell you guys real quick before we get rolling about the membership program, or the M-Pro. It's a brand new program we just came out with, specifically engineered for self-coached athletes and for athletes on a budget. It's going to include an initial one-on-one consultation, so it's the same consultation that the personal coaching clients get. Go through strengths, weaknesses, what are your goals, etc. Really kind of try to get you going in the right direction with the M-Pro. Training program of your choice, delivered in 4-week blocks, anything from sprint, Olympic, half Ironman, full Ironman, any of the different running races, 5K, 10K, half, full marathon, whatever it may be. Training plan of your choice, beginner, intermediate, advanced, etc. Triathlon study hall calls, so that's what you're on right now. These are not going to remain open to the public forever, so definitely something you're going to want to check out. Private Facebook group with weekly accountability. Facebook group is pretty cool. All the ESU athletes, not only just my clients, but all of the ESU athletes ultimately are on the Facebook group, and it's really starting to grow, pick up, and kind of gather some steam. There's some other big things that it has: weekly coaching tips and motivation, access to the private articles, videos, and MP3s. That's where you're going to get the full archives of all of the triathlon study hall calls. Right now, the 3 most popular are the running mechanics, swim mechanics, and the 3 key points to an Ironman race plan. And I'm pretty sure this one will probably get up there into the top 3, if not number 4. So those are some of the benefits of the membership program. It's a monthly commitment, 30-day notice to quit. $49.99 every 4 weeks is the cost. If anybody's interested in giving it a 2-week trial at no charge, use that discount code right there, MPRO-2-weeks, and that will get you 2 weeks free. Check out the archives, check out the training programs, see if any of them really work for you. It's a pretty solid program. One other special that we're starting today, anyone who registers for either 6 months or 12 months of the membership program, you are entered to win that nice shiny watch, or the red and white version. It's up to you. That's the Forerunner 920 XT cutting edge triathlon multi-sport watch. Basically, if you sign up for 6 months, you get 1 entry, 12 months, you get 2 entries. We're going to draw on October 1st. So a little added benefit for some of you guys and gals to get in to the program. So, all right, let's talk about what we're going to do today. We're going to start with a short presentation, Ironman Marathon and long run training. And from there, we're going to open it up to questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get rolling with the Ironman Marathon. All right, so how does an Ironman Marathon time compare to an open marathon time? And that's the main topic that we are going to be talking about tonight. And that's something that every athlete and every coach needs to know and understand. Is what's the difference between running a marathon by itself and running a marathon on the back half of an Ironman? All right, so ultimately, it's going to be about a 20 to 30 minute difference during the Ironman race. So for somebody who can run, let's say, under 4 hours, it's probably going to be about a 20-minute difference. Anybody who's over 4 hours, you're probably looking at something closer to a 30-minute difference. So there's your ranges. So let's take a look and see, what this actually means. How would we actually use this if we're going to prepare for an Ironman? All right. So the first thing we need to keep in mind is the pacing that we're trying to do, whether it be in training or whether it be on race day. We want to have a good idea of what am I supposed to be doing right now? What's my intensity supposed to be? So using those correct matrix is the absolute key to performance. If your training zones or racing zones are messed up, your training and racing is going to be messed up. There's no nicer way to put that. So the concept of output metrics versus input metrics are two very important things, right? So output metrics, that is something that is generated from what your output is as an athlete. So as we're talking about running, your output is how fast you're running. And that's what it is. It's that simple. An input metric is one that is determined and affected by the athlete's output, right? So an input metric, the most popular one around, heart rate, right? So if everybody on here, I'm assuming, has gone for a run at some point in their life. So if you go out and you run at a 12-minute pace, that could generate a heart rate of 110 beats a minute. We drop down to a 10-minute pace, now we're at 120 beats a minute. You drop down to a 9-minute pace, now maybe we're at 138 beats a minute. And as the speed keeps increasing, or your output keeps getting higher and higher, the input is going to increase with that. So when we're looking at running pace versus heart rate, running pace is the output metric, heart rate is the input metric. If you don't have the output metric, if you don't have a GPS or device or an accelerometer that will tell you how fast you're running, then you're stuck with heart rate, right? But if you have one, if you have a Garmin or whatever it is that's telling you, hey, you're running at this pace right now, that's all you need for running. That's very, very simple. It is far more advanced than the science of input metrics and using heart rate. Heart rate's better than nothing, but the output metrics, that's the way to go. So the two big output metrics we're looking at is VLT and VVO2, right? So the small v that you see in each of those, that's referring to velocity. How fast are you running? When we look at the LT, that's lactate threshold, right? So what is your velocity at lactate threshold? Or what is your VVO2? What is your velocity at VO2 max or VO2 peak? All right, so those are the two metrics that we definitely want to use. The VLT tends to be a little easier to use, especially if we're going to put it into training peaks and use that to calculate running zones for us. All right, so very simple, use the threshold method. For running, you're going to have the threshold speed, and you're going to want to use the Joe Friel for running calculation method, and that's going to get you your run paces. All right, so this is the basics of how do we determine a pace. What are we looking at? What do we really want to look at? And what do we not care that much about while we're actually training or racing? All right, so from here, how do we determine the VLT? How do we determine the VVO2? Right, so pretty straightforward. The great website, Macmillan Running, has the Macmillan Run Calculator. Absolutely great reference or resource to calculate these different metrics, right? So there's the website for you right there, macmillanrunning.com. Pretty straightforward process. All you got to do, you enter a time for a known distance time trial that will give you an estimated race time and a VLT number. All right, so let's go ahead and do an example of this real quick and kind of show you guys how you would do this, right? So if we have an athlete, Jane Doe, who is going to do her first Ironman, and she's wondering, okay, what do I need to do for run pacing? What's my goal at Ironman? How fast do I want to run? What do I think I can run the marathon in, etc. Right? So what we could do is send her out, have her run a 5K, right? You can do a 1 mile, you can do a 2 mile, any known distance. And if you're unsure, go to the Macmillan Running Calculator, look at the different distances they have there, pick one that you like, right? So for the Ironman distance, a 1 mile test, not bad, especially at the beginning of training, but as we start getting closer and closer to race day, 5K and even more importantly, a 10K time trial is going to give us a slightly better representation of where we're at, all right? And especially as that correlates to Ironman. So she goes out, she runs the 21-minute 5K, we put that into the Macmillan Run Calculator, right? And ultimately, it's going to pop up a graph or chart that's going to look something like this. So across the top gives you your VLT, so 7 minutes and 12 seconds per mile. The VVO2 is 6:12, right? And then we see the data that she actually did right here for the 5K, right? So she ran it in 21 minutes. That's a 6:46 pace, okay? So what we're looking at for, all right, how does this help us for Ironman? How does this help us for the marathon, an open marathon or the Ironman marathon? And what it's doing is it's predicting based off of this 21-minute 5K, it's telling us that we should be able to run a 3:24:37, right? That is an open marathon time. So we should be able to hold a 7:49 pace, right? So that's the first part of this. We get that numbers in, and then from here we're going to go ahead and do some calculations and see where do we want this sample athlete Jane Doe to run? How are we going to do this for her? So the predicted open marathon time was a 3:24:37, right? So remember we said anyone who's going to run sub 4, we're going to assume there's about a 20-minute difference, right? So her, based off of that 5K, we think that she could run an open marathon of 3:24. Based off of that, we think that she could run a 3:44 at Ironman, right? So that's what we're looking at. So what does that mean, right? What it equates to is it's the 3:24 open marathon, right? And ultimately, we're going to use the VLT pace that we got from the Macmillan Run Calculator to put into Training Peaks to get our training zones, right? So it's going to give us different paces for training and different paces for racing, okay? So with that, if this lady's going to run a 3:44 marathon, that's an 8:33 minute per mile pace, right? Which is a lot slower than the 7:47 that we were talking about for the 3:24, right? So those are the two differences. The question is, which one of those two numbers does she want to use for her preparation for the race? Which one does she want to use when she goes out and does her run training? Right? And I would tell you she needs to use the open marathon time, right? Because she ultimately, that's what she's training at. If we're going to do a brick workout after a big long bike ride, then maybe we look at transitioning to the pacing that would be generated for a 3:44. But in general, when we're doing standard traditional run training, whether it be for a running event, whether it be for a triathlon, an Ironman, whatever it is, we want to use the open run time, right? Because that's what your ability is on a Tuesday morning when you wake up, head out to the street, and say, okay, I got a run workout, right? You didn't just ride 112 miles, right? So using the pacing that is based off of the marathon that is open, that's going to be the way to go, right? So that is the key to running. That is the key to getting the most out of your run training, is having the proper paces, right? So with that, if we take a look at the graph that just popped up, or the matrix, across the top we have the total time for the marathon, average pace, estimated VLT, and then we have what would be, if we threw this into Training Peaks, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4 respectively for this woman. All right, so if I'm saying, hey, she's going to go out, she's going to do her long run, she's going to go run for 2 hours, does she want to use the pacing based off of the open marathon time or based off of the Ironman marathon time? So if we're going to have her run in zone 2 or less, the open marathon time is going to put her anywhere from an 8:10 to a 9:15 pace, right? That's her long run pace. When we look at what it would be for an Ironman, we're now looking at anything from 8:56 to 10:06, right? So if she's using the Ironman time, right, so this 3:44, if she's using that number, right, which gives us a VLT, and I believe these numbers are actually incorrect. Not sure how those got messed up. But if we're going to use the pacing that is between 8:56 and 10:06, that's not in zone 2. That's very much in zone 1, right? So are we getting the biggest bang for our buck? Maybe, maybe not, right? But this is the difference right here. This is almost a minute slower for the Ironman time than it is for the open marathon time, right? And now you can see if she's going to, let's say, bump something up into zone 3 for part of a long run, she is now going to be aiming for 8:18 to 8:56 to be in zone 3. But what is that actually putting her at? It's actually putting her in zone 2. So is she actually doing the amount of work that she thinks that she is? No, she's not, right? And that's the problem with when we use the wrong time, when we use the wrong goal time, when we use the wrong VLT, we end up thinking that we're doing one thing when in reality we're actually training at a completely different intensity. All right, so with that, the training pace, base it on the 3:24. When she gets out on race day and she gets off the bike, she hands it to the volunteer, she heads into the changing tent, she changes into the running shoes, whatever else, and boom, out the door. She needs to use the pacing now based off the Ironman time, right? Because guess what? She did just ride the 112 miles, right? So now when she's racing, if she's going to keep it between 8:56 and 10:06, she's perfectly within zone 2. Where if she tried keeping the open marathon time, now she's trying to stay between 8:10 and 9:15, which is right here, which is actually running in zone 3 on race day, when she thinks that she's running in zone 2, right? So you can see the problem there, right? So with what's the bottom line of this? When we're training, We want to use the open times, whether it be marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, whatever it may be. We want to use the open times. On race day, we need to use the time that is being predicted after you swam 2.4 miles and rode 112 miles, right? Or whatever your event is. If it's a 1.2 mile swim and a 56-mile bike, or an Olympic or a sprint distance, we need to have the proper goal time, and we need to have the proper pacing that's based off of that. So that kind of sums up what we're looking at with the Ironman Marathon. Now let's talk real briefly about the long run, right? So the main reasons for a long run, it's time on your feet, right? That is the main thing. On top of that, it's building endurance. Obviously, you're staying in zone 1, zone 2. The biggest thing, time on your feet. It's stressing the limbs, it's stressing the bones, it's stressing the connective tissue, it's stressing the muscles in a very sport-specific fashion, right? And that is a huge goal in training. We have to accomplish that, right? So whether you're running for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, or 6 hours, it's time on your feet. You're building endurance. There does become a point at which we have diminishing returns. And that is all based off of the muscular damage that you're ultimately doing with a long run. So if somebody goes out, most Ironman athletes that are following a well-written training program and they're doing the training, they're consistently getting out, swimming, biking, and running, should be able to go out and knock off a 2-hour run without much of a problem, especially once you get to within, let's say, 10 to 12 weeks of the event. You darn well better be able to knock out a 2-hour run. Okay, it might hurt more than it would in 5 weeks to go, but it's something that from a physical standpoint, you should be able to do. All right, so if I have somebody go out and run for 2 hours, the recovery might take half a day, might take a day, right? So if I have them run it on Thursday, they're going to come out on Friday. They're going to have a little bit of residual soreness, maybe a little bit of residual fatigue on Friday, but come Saturday, good to go. If I bump it from 2 to 2.5 hours, now I'm adding more recovery, right? I got 30 minutes more worth of muscular damage being done to that athlete's legs. So now instead of being maybe a little bit stiff and a little bit fatigued, now maybe they're just a little more stiff and more fatigued. Maybe their recovery isn't complete by Saturday morning, right? What happens if I have them run 3.5 hours? What happens if I go with the marathon training theory of, hey, you got to do a 20 miler before you're going to do the marathon? And I send somebody out to do a 20 miler and that takes them 4.5 hours, right? How much muscular damage is 4.5 hours worth of running going to do that athlete? That's going to wipe out Friday. It's going to wipe out any valuable training on Saturday. And it's probably going to put a really big dent into any valuable training on Sunday. So there becomes a point when the diminishing returns start showing up where the muscular damage and the recovery that's going to be associated with a longer run just simply doesn't make it worth it. All right. Now, if you're training for a marathon, that's a different can of worms, right? Because ultimately, the long run, that's probably your key workout. It's probably on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you probably have a recovery session built in for the next day. And then you get back into the next week, and you simply get into more running. When we're talking about triathlon, Ironman in particular, if we do our long run on Thursday, Saturday, we'd better be fresh for some sort of long bike ride, a long brick, whatever it may be. And if I'm doing additional running during my long run on a Thursday, let's say, I'm going to negatively impact the bigger, more important workout on Saturday, right? Remember, 26.2 miles, that's a long way to go. Not quite as far as 112 miles, right? So the bike, you want the biggest bang for your buck? Train more on the bike, right? That's where you're going to have the least amount of time training, cutting off the biggest amount of time on the race day, all right? So long runs, it's all about time on your feet and building endurance. Second thing, the physiological benefits that we're seeking, they include stroke volume, increasing the mitochondrial density and capillarization, and we're also looking at strengthening the connective tissue in the lower limbs, right? So stuff that we've kind of talked about before, it's increasing endurance, right? Stroke volume, how much blood can your heart pump through the system? Increased mitochondrial density, that's the powerhouse of the cell, right? That's what the mitochondria does. It creates the energy that makes the cell do what it's doing, right? So would it be good to be able to produce more ATP? Yeah, absolutely. What about capillarization? What does that mean, right? More capillaries, more blood capillaries in the muscle cells, muscle tissue that we're wanting to use while swimming, biking, running in this case, okay? So when we are increasing the capillaries, what we're doing is we're increasing the amount of blood that we can deliver to those muscles. What comes with blood? Nutrients, oxygen, right? Those are two pretty darn big things for any exercise that we're doing, right? So do we want increased stroke volume? Yep, more blood flowing through the system. Increased mitochondrial density? Yep, generate more ATP, more substrate for us to use. Increased capillarization? Yes, please, we'll take some more blood down there also, right? Now, strengthening the connective tissue? That's something that isn't really talked about a lot, right? But your connective tissue, right? So the tendons and the ligaments, they have to be strengthened appropriately, and that just comes from repetitive motion. It comes from running, it comes from cycling, it comes from swimming. It's the best way, and it's just about the only way you're really going to make sport specific adaptations to the connective tissue, right? So time running, right? Now, those of you, real quick little tidbit, those of you that you go out for your run and you're looking for grass, you're looking for dirt, you're looking for anything other than the sidewalk or the asphalt, right? How many of you have done that? If we raised hands, if we were sitting in a conference room, I'm pretty sure every single person at some point in their triathlon career would have to raise their hand, right? I know personally, I did it when I first started doing triathlon, right? What's the problem with that though? You either stress the system appropriately, right? And when I'm talking about system, I'm talking about the connective tissue in the lower legs and the bones, right? If all we're doing is running on a nice, soft, padded, grassy surface, or we're running on trails, what are you racing on race day is my question. Because if your body is not prepared to take that pounding on race day, is it going to take the pounding on race day? No. You're going to be walking down the road going, that Ryan guy might have been right, and I really wish I would have run more on the concrete or on the sidewalk or the asphalt or whatever it may be. So that's some more absolutely essential stuff with the long runs. Last key point to this slide, the benefits that we're looking for occur most effectively in zones 1 and zone 2. Right? So that's anywhere from 60 to 75% of your max heart rate. Do not look at your heart rate while you're running, right? So those of you that are like, this heart rate thing, I want to look at my heart rate. Check this out. Let me tell you what your heart rate's going to tell you an hour 45 into your next 2-hour training run. It's going to tell you you're working very hard, right? It's going to tell you you're an hour 45 into the run, it hurts, and you're tired, right? What's it going to tell you on race day? The exact same thing, right? Does that help you gauge your effort? No, because you already know that. You already know this hurts, I'm tired, and I'm going as hard as I can go right now, right? So that's what heart rate's going to give you, right? So look at the speed, look at the pace. That's going to be the money-making metric, right? So the other thing we can take a look at, 55 to 75% of VO2 max. For anybody who has access to an exercise physiology lab, good solid number. The VO2 max tests, to accurately do that, you gotta have a metabolic cart. You're looking at 100, 150 bucks a test. It starts becoming prohibitively expensive for people. All right, so conclusions. What do we need to know? What do we need to take home from this? Right, first thing, we need to use the proper output metrics for training and racing. Right, so we need running pace, minute per mile. That's what we need to base our training and our racing off of, not heart rate, pace. Okay. Second thing, we want to make sure that we're using the proper goal marathon time, or if you're doing a half, 10K, 5K, that use the proper time for that, for your training zones and for racing, right? So remember the example we did, the woman said she was capable of running a 324 open, which meant she'd probably be right around 344 on race day. So for training, we use the open time, the 324, and everything that's associated with that. On race day, we're using the pacing that's associated with the 344, right? So that's the brief talk on the Ironman Marathon, how to predict the race times, what you're kind of looking at, and then how to use those numbers to get the right training metrics, to get the right training zones, the right racing zones established. That way you're getting the biggest bang for your buck every time you lace your shoes up on training, and then when you get off the bike on race day, you're not trying to run a 324 marathon, you're trying to run a 344, right? Run with the zones based off the right time. So real quick, once again, anybody who's going to sign up for the 6 or 12 months of the membership program, you're entered to win the Garmin 920 XT. 6-month purchase gets you 1 entry, 12-month gets you 2. All right, so drawings on October 1st, and then the next triathlon study hall, not going to be September 1st, it's going to be the 8th and it will be the exact same link. Ultimately, give me another 24 hours or so to get that all changed and updated. And anyone who's interested in the membership program, you want to check out the Triathlon Study Hall archives or any of the other really awesome resources we have up there. Get into the Facebook group, get the training program of your choice. Get a free 2-week trial. Check it out, mpro-2-weeks. It's a pretty outstanding offer. So, all right, let's see what we have in the way of questions. Anybody who has questions, go ahead and type them in, and we'll go ahead and get to them. All right, great question by Jeff. All right, so Jeff's question is, how do these times translate down into shorter races? Okay, for somebody who is looking at a half marathon and a half Ironman, instead of 20 to 30 minutes, I think I would probably say 15 to 20, maybe up to 25 for somebody who's going to be up over the 2-hour mark. For the 10K and the 5K, off the top of my head, I would say a 5K will be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, and a 10K maybe 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that area. That would be my guess on that, Jeff. So that's a great question right there. Thank you. All right, we got one from Vincent. So should we include intensity in running intervals zone 4 and 5 in Ironman training? Yes, absolutely. Great question. All right, so let's take a look bigger picture with this and kind of see what it is we're looking at doing with run training for an Ironman, and then these same basic principles are going to be for a half, an Olympic, and a sprint also. Okay, so the main runs we need to get in each week for when we're preparing for an Ironman, we need to run off the bike. Right. So normally the way I'll lay it out is on a Saturday, we're going to have the big bike workout that's incredibly race specific, and then we're running off the bike. Right. So that's going to be one run that we have to get in. Right. If you don't run off the bike, you're going to have a very interesting experience when you get off the bike on race day. All right. So first run we need to get in, or one of the first runs we need to get in, is the run off the bike. Right. So longer bike ride, running off of it. The second most important run for an Ironman is going to be the long run. Right? We simply have to build up our endurance, and we have to build up our muscular system, the connective tissue, the skeletal system, and the lower body to be able to handle running a marathon, or a half marathon and a half Ironman, or 10K, 5K for Olympic and sprint distance respectively. Okay, so those are the two big runs that we have to get in each week. Other than that, the third run normally is going to involve something with speed. Okay, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So those are your 3 runs that you better get in each week, especially once you get to within 12 to 15 weeks of the event. You got to have those 3 runs in there. If you're going to add any more running in on top of that, unless you are a professional or a legitimate elite caliber athlete, right? So we're talking sub 10 hours for guys, and we're talking sub 10:30 for the gals at Ironman. If you're doing that, now we can look at doing some fancier things. If you're not doing that, just a nice, easy aerobic zone 1, zone 2 run is all that you need to do. All right. So when it comes to the intensity, when it comes to the speed day or the interval day or whatever we're going to call it, what does that need to look like? Right. And that really is going to be athlete dependent. All right. So if we're going to look at, let's say we have 3 different example athletes, right? Athlete number 1 is somebody who is hoping to just finish the race in 16 hours or so, and they're just going to be happy getting the medal. Second example is going to be a guy or a gal who's going to go somewhere around the 12-hour mark. And then we'll use the third example will be, an elite caliber athlete. Let's say it's a guy who's going to go, 9 something, low 9s, let's say. All right. So the example number 1 for the athlete who is simply wanting to finish the race, right? They don't necessarily need speed work. All right. It really depends on the athlete, and it really depends on how their training progresses, right? So this is where efficiency factor and coupling and decoupling with the aerobic runs that they're doing at the beginning of the training plan is really going to let us know where is their running ability, right? And once we are to a point where they are hitting the numbers we want with efficiency factor, coupling, and decoupling, that's when we're going to look at adding some speed in. Okay, and the first thing I would add in with them would just be some very simple blot intervals where it would be 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, right? So 30 seconds at, like, let's say a 1 mile pace, and then 30 seconds super easy jog, right? And you can do sets of 5 with a little recovery in between, or you can do just 10 in a row, 15 in a row, whatever it may be. And what that is doing is that's adding the high intensity interval training or HIIT training into this that is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck with the run training. All right, that's where we're going to see the physiological adaptations that can't be generated from long, slow distance training. Okay, so that's with example number 1. Example number 2, the guy or the gal who's looking at that 12-hour mark somewhere in there, they absolutely are going to have speed work added in there. I'd start with the blot intervals, and then there's all kinds of different track stuff you can do. We can look at mile repeats, and this is getting into when we're talking about the speed, the high intensity interval stuff is zone 5 or higher, right? When we're talking about maybe getting into mile repeats or 1K repeats or 2-mile repeats, now we're looking at maybe somewhere down in the threshold, zone 4, zone 5 area. Okay. So that's something that they're going to want to really add in there. And then if we look at example number 3, where we have somebody who is a legitimate elite caliber athlete, right? They plain and simply have to have the high intensity interval training. There's no other way around that, right? You can have them run at threshold all day long. It's going to get them some benefits without a doubt, but it's that high intensity interval training is what is really going to push them through the plateau that they're going to have already being at that high performing level, basically, is what it's going to be. So, Vincent, I hope that answers your question. And I completely just erased the other one. Type in your second question again for me, Vincent. I hit the wrong button there. All right, anybody else who has questions, type them in. It can be about running. It can be about anything you guys or gals want. You just got to type it in. Any questions? All right, Vince, thanks for typing that back in. Great question by Vincent. All right, so question is, what zone should we run in off the bike on a big brick day, and for how long? In general, aiming at race pace is always a good thing, and I would just make sure you're using, if you're going to ride long, right? So we're talking, 80 miles or longer, 90 miles or longer. Let's say 5 hours or more. If you're not quite hitting those distances, if you're a little bit on the slower side. You're looking at race pace. Just simply get used to running off the bike. The more advanced athletes, you guys and gals can really start looking at some more interval based work, some more speed type of stuff off the bike. But in general, the big thing on the transition run in training is just get to race pace. Be able to run at what you want to run on race day. So that's what I would say with intensity. For distance, again, that also depends on the athlete, right? So if we use those same 3 examples, the person who's looking to go 16 hours or so, I don't really know that they need to run more than 30 to 45 minutes off the bike at the longest, right? Because it's simply, someone who's going to do a 16-hour Ironman, they're not running the entire marathon, right? They're walking a good part of that. So, having them run, having them get used to running off the bike and using that to increase their run volume, definitely beneficial to them. Somebody who is now, like example 2 or 3, getting into, that 12-hour mark for example 2, and then getting into the low 9s for example 3, now we can get up to a longer run, right? And the problem, the thing you got to keep in mind is you're doing a lot of muscular damage by riding 100, 112 miles, right? But that is something that's very doable, right? Everybody on this call, if the motivation was correct, whether that be money or a cow prod or some combination thereof, I can get you to ride 112 miles at a reasonable pace for 7 days in a row, right? I have no doubt about that. Could I get you to run for 2 hours for more than 2 days in a row? Maybe if the motivation was correct. And at that point, the cash isn't doing it. It's more of the cow prod that's keeping you moving, right? So from the cycling perspective, we're doing enough damage that we have to keep that in the back of our mind. But the run off the bike is where the majority of that muscular damage is really going to be shown. That's where we're really going to see it taking place. So it could be a thing of where, on Saturday we're going to ride 5.5 hours and run for an hour off the bike, and then on Sunday we're going to do another bike session, right? It really depends on what are we wanting to accomplish on Sunday, right? Because if I have you ride, 5.5 hours on Saturday and then get off the bike and run for an hour, how much residual fatigue and muscle soreness are you going to have on Sunday from that? That's the question, right? So the question it's do I want quantity or do I want quality, right? Primarily on Sunday, but also what do I need to accomplish on the run, right? If I have somebody who's doing a 12-hour Ironman, they're probably running the majority of that marathon, and they're running it at a pretty reasonable pace. Somebody who's going around 9 hours, they're running the whole marathon, and they're running it at a very reasonable pace, right? So the athlete that's going close to 9, they are going to have some very specific things they need to accomplish off the bicycle, right? They need to not only be able to run, right? But that's something, if they're going to be able to run, to go 9 hours, they can run a marathon off the bike. That's not a question mark, right? So now it becomes, okay, what do we need to do specifically for that athlete off the bike to help get them just a little bit faster, right? Remember, for guys, you get down to that 9-hour mark at Ironman, the next big jump is dropping down into that 8:30, 8:40 range, right? You drop down to 8:55 and it's like, ho hum, nice job, you're an amateur, right? If you want to make that next big jump that I'm talking about, you want to go race against the next level of people, that's the professional men, right? Those guys are going 8 hours, not 9 hours, right? So what has to happen to make that big jump? Not necessarily high intensity interval runs off of the bike, but definitely more intervals, right? It could be anything from mile repeats, 2-mile repeats, could be a descending ladder. We could even look at running 1Ks, 800s, 400s, whatever it is. And this is where, the coach that's writing the training program and that's working with that athlete really needs to be able to look and see what is this athlete doing? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses on the bike? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses on the run? And that's more talking about on the bicycle, your FTP is an important number, but what can you hold for 2 or 3 hours? That's what's more important, right? Where if you're doing an Olympic distance event, what can you hold for an hour? That's what's important in a 40K bike ride, right? So when it comes to running, right, does the athlete have more skills, or is their skill set better suited towards long distance, towards a marathon, or is it more suited towards a shorter race like a 5K or 10K? What is their running ability at given distances, right? And that's where the coach or whoever's putting together the training program really needs to be able to look at that and say, okay, this is what this athlete needs, right? And it doesn't necessarily, the majority of the big ticket, high payoff run work that any athlete does isn't off the bike, right? That has to do with the mental side of it. It has to do with getting your body used to running off the bike. It's a neuromechanical thing. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in that regard, where the long run and then an interval or speed run during the week, that's where you're making the money, right? So Vincent, I hope that answers your question. If not, type something else in there for me. All right. And we got Jeff with another one. So suggestions on transitioning to running sockless for shorter races. Jeff, you got to not get big giant blisters on the bottom of your foot like you do right now. What I would tell you is start off with just simply wearing the shoes barefoot. You're looking for hot spots, which you found very easily. Once you've identified a hot spot, you got to put something down there. I know moleskin, and there's some stuff like that that's around. That's your best bet. An old army trick would be to put some duct tape or 90-mile-an-hour tape on your foot. Believe me, that works better than moleskin, but that is not a pleasant thing to take off at the end of the day, because it is going to stick to the skin and it will take the skin with it when you pull it off. So moleskin, probably your best bet. You could even look at something like kinesio tape. You got to be very careful that you don't start making the kinesio tape do what it's supposed to do. So myofascial, stretching and that type of thing. You don't need that happening in your foot. The goal is to prevent friction. So I would start off with, wear them around without any socks and just try to identify the hot spots. And then from there, when you find them, you gotta come up with something that's gonna keep you from getting blisters. So, all right, good question. All right, what else do we got, guys and gals? Give me some good questions. All right, Vincent, no problem. Glad that helped. Jeff found one. I don't know. Oh yeah, you found your hotspot for sure. If I could pull up the picture right now, I'm sure it would make a few people wince in pain. So, all right, what else do we got, guys and gals? Give me some good questions. Any topic you want. Swimming, biking, running, nutrition, transition, exercise physiology, biomechanics, how tasty my cup of coffee is. Questions. Come on, guys and gals, give me some good ones. Anybody? This is your guys' time to get whatever questions. All right, we got one from Lisa. Great question, Lisa. Lisa, I'm going to bring you in to actually ask this question because there are far too many little nuances here to answer it without talking to you. All right, Lisa, are you there? Lisa? All right, I guess Lisa's microphone is not working. All right, so Lisa, I will do my best to answer it. All right, so Lisa's question, great question. What's the best way to prevent stomach shutdown on the bike to allow nutrition intake on the run while doing an Ironman? Great question, Lisa. All right, so my guess, right, and if you want to start typing some of this information in as I kind of throw some guesses out there, whether I'm right or wrong, and I'll try to modify as we go through. My guess, when most people say to me, hey, I had my stomach shut down, off the bike or right into the run, and I had a hard time taking nutrition in, etc. My guess is they're taking in way too many calories on the bicycle. That's my guess, right? So the stomach, there obviously is a limited amount of fluid and calories and all that good stuff that we can fit in at any one time. That's obvious. Everybody understands that. So what we have to understand while training, whether it be an Ironman, a half Ironman, 10K run, a half marathon, whatever it is, the intensity at which we're running or riding or whatever it is going to shunt blood away from the stomach, right? So the muscles that we are using to, move ourselves forward, that's what needs the blood, right? So the stomach is saying, hey, you guys over there are working really hard, nice, Mr. Quads and, glutes and everything else that's working really well. You guys are working really hard. You need the blood. We need to get oxygen and nutrients to you, right? So that's the first thing that we have to be able to overcome, because we simply can't digest things at the same rate as if we are sitting at work or, after we're done with a workout and, gotten cleaned up and are having lunch or dinner or whatever it may be. That's something that we have to keep in mind. So it comes down to how do we space out our calories and how many calories are we adding in on the bike? Okay, and now Lisa added another comment in. She says she's using UCAN on the bike to keep the calories relatively low during the bike ride. So Lisa, let me ask you this before I keep going. Are you taking in anything else while you're out there other than water? So gels, chews, bars, sports drink, Gatorade, whatever it is. So is there anything else that you're taking in other than UCAN while you're on the bike? All right, so Lisa says electrolytes and salt. How are you taking them in? Is that all through the protein bar, or is it through other? Is it through a gel or a chew or something like that? Base. Okay, so that's the one you put on your. You lick your thumb and you shake it on the thing and you put it in your mouth. Got it. Powder in. All right, powder in the drink. Is that the UCAN? That's where you're also getting the electrolytes and the salt. Okay, amino. You're getting amino acids also from the UCAN from base. Okay, and you are just using the little tube of salt that you put on your thumb and then basically put on your tongue. That what you're using with base? Okay, separate amino. What is the separate amino acids that you're taking in? What's the name of the product? Also a base product. Okay, cool. All right, so Lisa, you're the unique one here. Okay. So in general, and Lisa is not fitting into this model here. So let me give you the in general, Lisa, and then I will uh kind of get onto my thoughts about what you're describing here. So in general, people who are doing an Ironman are getting tremendously poor advice, whether it be from a magazine or a website or a blog or a coach or a training partner or somebody who saw the Ironman on TV. Right? They're in general getting terrible nutritional advice. Right? So there's way too often. I think if we took a poll of 100 random Ironman athletes, I would bet you that 60+%, probably up to 70% of those people are taking in at least 300 calories an hour on the bike, right? And that is a tremendous amount of calories, plain and simple. All right. So, um, somebody who is in that scenario, you got to cut the calories back, right? You're putting too much in your system. Your stomach is limited in what it can digest, what it can process. And so as you keep piling on top, you're ultimately going to shut your stomach down, right? There isn't any other real way around that. Okay. So now with Lisa, this is a very unique situation, right? So Lisa is using a product called UCAN, which is a super starch that has been developed that its main role is to control the blood sugar spike that is associated with taking in carbohydrates. Okay, so what we normally will see is somebody will grab a Gatorade or a gel or whatever it is, they'll take it into their system, and the sugar primarily, which is the high glycemic index carbohydrate that you're taking in for fuel, is going to be very rapidly converted into energy. You're going to see a very large blood sugar spike, right? So if you envision a graph going from left to right, and as we're going from left to right, there's a big spike, right? It goes way up to the top. That's what you're getting when you dump a gel or Gatorade or whatever it is into your system, right? And then that spike will start slowly dropping back down, right? As we are using that carbohydrate or sugar that we've added into our system in order to have more energy. So the problem is when we get with the normal sports nutrition products, Gatorade or gels or chews or bars or whatever it is, we have a associated insulin response to that blood sugar spike, right? So in a normal human being who does not have type 1 diabetes, who can produce insulin, when your body has that big giant sugar spike, your body's going to go, oh, hey, yeah, there's a lot of blood sugar there. You better release some insulin to get that stuff distributed to where we need it to go. So you have this massive insulin dump into your system also. The problem is with the normal American diet, in quotation marks, bread, pasta, fast food crap that everybody likes to eat, our bodies have become used to the big giant sugar spikes, right? So, I mean, how many of you have had, you got a Red Bull at three in the afternoon, or you got a coffee with 12 pounds of sugar in it, or you got a Snickers bar or whatever it is. Anytime we get these cheap, junky sugar calories dumped into our system, our body has realized, hey, this is crap they're putting into our system. We got to take care of this, right? Because if the insulin doesn't get dumped into your system and doesn't take care of this, you got bigger problems. So what tends to happen is there's an over response with the insulin. We're putting the body is releasing more insulin than it actually needs. So instead of that coming that as that blood sugar spike comes back down, instead of it hitting the baseline and leveling out, it's going to continue to drop below that baseline, right? So that's the sugar high, that's the sugar crash, right? And that's what's physiologically happening with insulin, right? So what's going on with UCAN with the superstarch, it doesn't have the massive sugar spike, right? It's anywhere from maybe a third to a quarter or a third to the size of if you ate a Snickers bar, maybe a little more than that, depending on the person or how much you're taking in at one given time. But what that's also going to do, so not only do we get away from the seesaw or teeter-totter super high, super low, super high, super low with blood sugar, we are now keeping a more level or consistent blood sugar profile, right? And so that's the goal of UCAN, right? So that it should last longer, and we are removing the super high, super low, super high, super low, spike, drop with blood sugar. Right. So Lisa, if you're having major issues with UCAN, um, I would take a closer look at how much UCAN you're putting in a bottle, how much you're actually taking in an hour. Um, my guess is you're still pretty high, but I could be totally off on that. But take a look at the number of calories you're dumping in the bottle, right? And then take a look at how, if you're putting 150 calories in a bottle and you're drinking that bottle over the full hour, I I would be surprised if the UCAN is the culprit. Okay, if you're putting 300 calories in there and you're killing a bottle every 45 minutes, now you're just using a very expensive sports nutrition product to get too many calories into your system. So I'd say take a look at that and then shoot me an email, Lisa. Let me know what you come back with. I'd love to discuss this with you more and try to get to the bottom of this with you. Other things to look at. Do you have any regular food allergies? Like gluten or dairy, lactose. Sorry, anything like that. And then the last thing to really take a look at there off the top of my head would be the electrolytes that you're adding into your system. One of the first triathlon study hall calls we did, which is another great reason for you guys to try your 2 weeks free trial, because you can go back and watch the entire thing, was we talked about what electrolytes are actually doing and whether they're needed or not needed while training and racing. And ultimately, to kind of recap that very briefly, the concentration of sodium inside your body is a lot higher than the concentration of sodium in the sweat once it's left your body. Right? So if we lose an ounce of water through sweat, we are not losing the equivalent amount of salt. Right? We are actually losing a lot less. So when you are sweating, what you're ultimately doing to the electrolyte concentration inside your body, you're actually increasing it. Right? You're removing the solvent, right? But you're leaving the solute or the salt in there, right? So when you are dumping more salt in on top of that, you're actually continuing to increase the concentration of sodium even more, which is going to make you thirstier, right? And that can start creating issues inside the stomach and inside the gut. So I would say, one thing to try this week or this coming weekend, Lisa, would be leave the salt at home, or just put it in your back pocket and say, I'm not taking this unless I feel like I'm just dying here. All right. And then go UCAN and plain water. And let's see where that gets you. So Lisa, I hope that kind of answers your question. That's a great question. I really appreciate you asking that one. So I don't know if that helped you or not. Okay, great. Says it gave you some good ideas. So, all right, yeah, shoot me an email. Let me know how that goes. So, all right, guys, any more questions? We got a few more minutes left. So anyone who has let's go with one more question. Who's got one more good one? Somebody who has not asked a question yet. We got Karen. If you have a question, type it in. Rich, if you got a question, type it in. Love to help you guys out here while we're on the call. Vincent, if you have another one, Lisa or Jeff. Oh, we got Karen. All right, last question has been in. If you have one, type it in. I'll get to it. All right. What do I recommend using instead of goo while running? Great question, Karen. I guess I have a question for you first. What are you trying to accomplish by taking a goo or a gel, power gel, whatever it is? What are you trying to accomplish by taking that in on the run? So type that answer in for me, and then I can give you a better answer to your question. All right. Goal is to keep your energy up. All right. So you're looking for, normally that's going to mean calories, right? So carbohydrates. Um, the only real problem with gels, so goo or power gel or any of the other ones that they have out there these days, they were originally designed to deliver electrolytes to your system, right? And then they realized, hey, if we put some calories in there also, we're getting, extra bang for the buck here. So when it comes to the electrolytes, like I had just mentioned, not super valuable to add in. Especially if we're just running a marathon, you really don't need electrolytes. You got to get up into the 8, 9, 10 plus hours of racing and training before we really do need to start taking in electrolytes, right? And how do we take them in? I know of one nutrition product that's commercially available that I can order that doesn't have electrolytes in it, and that's UCAN. There's one version, I think it's the plain flavor of UCAN, that you can order that doesn't have electrolytes. Everything else, it's going to have electrolytes, right? So you're going to get it, whether you really want it or not. It's just, do I want to take in extra salt specifically for that? That's where I think we start getting into trouble. So if we're looking for something, what's going to provide me with energy, what's going to provide me with carbohydrates to keep me going while running? Ultimately, in an Ironman, anything that you can get into your system that you think you can keep down, right? And that comes from not only someone could be taking in too much stuff or taking it in too quickly, but it also can be simple taste, right? One of the most interesting things that I ever noticed when I was racing way back when, um, there's a product called Nuun, Nuun, which is an electrolyte tablet, which at the time I was using because, hey, I needed electrolytes. You gotta have electrolytes when you're out racing and training, right? Then I went to grad school and it's like, yeah, not so much, right? So I had them. So I had a mix of Carbo Pro, and I would take the little Nuun tablets, which is kind of like an Alka-Seltzer, but it has electrolytes and flavoring instead of just fizzy, bicarb. It adds flavor to it, right? And that's primarily why I was doing it, because Carbo Pro had no flavor, had no taste, right? So one thing that I found that was very interesting was if I had the tri-berry flavor in cold water, absolutely love it. Still to this day, my favorite flavor of Nuun. And if I have a glass of water that I, really don't feel like drinking plain water, while I'm sitting here working, I'll put a Nuun tablet in there and it's delicious. But if you take that same water and you put that at room temperature, or you put it at whatever the ambient temperature is outside while I'm riding, I won't drink it because I can't stand the way it tastes, right? So that's something that I learned through testing it out, right? So if I'm going to be racing or training, it's all about the lemon lime, right? If I'm hanging out in the office doing some work and I want some water, try berry. I absolutely love it, right? So in a race, ultimately, anything that you can stomach, that you can take in and digest, right? That's what you're aiming at. When it comes to training, right, now that's a different scenario. So the human body, if somebody has a well-rounded, reasonable diet, you're going to be able to race or train for right about 2 hours without seeing a performance drop off, right? You get to that hour 45 mark and you're going to start feeling it. 2 hours, performance is going to drop, right? So if you're going out for a run that's less than 2 hours, you don't necessarily need to have any additional calories. All you really need is plain water, right? If you're going over 2 hours, now you're going to want calories, right? So when it comes to running, as long as you have plain water with you, taking a gel is not a bad idea. It's going to get you, I think it's about 100, 120 calories or so. The electrolytes can create their own issue, but if you're going for, let's say, a really long run type of a thing, 3 hours, all right, um, going for 3 hours, you're going to need some calories, right? So if you have a single gel, maybe at that 90-minute mark, that should be more than enough to hold you over. Maybe you need two, maybe one at the end of hour number one and one at the end of hour number two, right? That should be all you're going to need for calories, right? And the biggest thing we have to do is just make sure that we have plain water to chase that down with, to dilute out that gel once it's gotten into our stomach, right? Because if we're taking this gelatinous lump of electrolytes and calories and dumping that into our system and we don't dilute that out, the stomach will actually start pulling water from the surrounding tissues to dilute that out in the stomach. All right, so keep that in mind. And Karen, I think that's probably your best bet on a regular run, anything under an hour and a half. I think just plain water. So, all right, good. I'm glad that's what you do. Whoever told you to do that, they must know what they're talking about, and that isn't me. Everybody, not making a cheap, compliment to myself. So, all right, guys. Hey, everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. We had some really outstanding questions today. I definitely think this is going to be an episode in the archives that people are going to be checking out for sure. So, all right, guys, give me till middle of the day tomorrow to get the links all updated, and then you see it right there, September 8th, not the 1st. First is today. Same time, same station. Again, check out this membership program. It's a great offer. Some really outstanding resources. Top tier, cutting edge training programs for you also. So, all right, guys, thanks for coming out, and I will see you guys next week.